I want to talk a little bit about the history of working at Semliki and then talk about the research that's going on. Um, I'm an ecomorphologist. I try to use information about the environment to connect that to behavior and anatomy in an attempt to understand animals better. We call this ecomorphology. So that's a study of how environment yields adaptation. Um, but the reason it's interesting to me is in living animals, we can look at the way they gather food and link that to anatomy. So chimpanzees eat fruit and they have to get up into the tree because they spend part of their time walking on the ground, and so they need to be able to grip trees about the size of a soda can in order to climb up there. And so they have a foot that is very well adapted to helping them to climb in the trees. Well, what I do is I take that relationship and I turn it around and look at fossils. So for fossils, we only have the anatomy. We get some molecular stuff and genetic stuff, but mostly it's just the anatomy. And we try to infer behavior from that anatomy and then use that to help us to better understand the evolution of animals. And so that's what I've spent most of my career doing. So I try to link specific aspects of anatomy with behaviors and use that to try to figure out how an animal was living their lives. So the scapula of chimpanzees is almost entirely an adaptation to the distinctiveness of it to arm hanging. That's what that little abbreviation there is. But long arms help them both with feeding using arm hanging and climbing into trees. So it's not just that foot that helps them, but it's the arms as well. So I try to use those sorts of connections to help me to understand what the fossils are like. And I'm most interested in understanding why bipedalism evolved, why that very unusual behavior that humans have evolved in an animal that was at one time very much like an ape. So I started my career studying locomotion and posture at Gombe, working a little bit with Jane Goodall and working with Toshisada Nishida at Mahale, two Tanzanian places. And I was hoping to make some connection between the traits that we find that are like chimpanzees that are found in the Lucy fossils. So here's one example. That's a human finger bone on the left, and you can see that chimp bone that's turned a little at an angle, sort of cupped in the middle, canoe shaped, I call it. And the Lucy fossils are exactly like that. They look much more like chimpanzees than they do like humans. So while I was studying this, the locomotion and posture of chimpanzees, interested in bipedalism, I found that chimpanzees were bipedal, and they were not often, but sometimes they were bipedal. And it wasn't in the circumstances that we expected. It wasn't while they were walking, which is what most people would have expected would happen, but while they were feeding. And so I made a connection between that feeding behavior and the dry habitat. This is interesting because our earliest bipedal ancestors, the australopiths, were those fossils were found with fossils that were dry habitat adapted animals like hyenas and rhinos and zebras and cob, which you're less familiar with, but they're a dry habitat antelope-like animal, and giraffes. So that suggests that they were found in dry habitats. So in the 90s, I argued that it was an adaptation to these dry habitats that caused bipedalism to evolve, and it evolved as a feeding strategy. So here's my reconstruction of a sort of moment in the life of Australopiths with males more like gorillas, is the case in gorillas and chimps, males on the ground a little more than females, but still up in the trees sometimes. I don't have that guy up in the tree yet, but females harvesting fruit, both reaching up from the ground and in a sort of semi-suspensory, semi-arm hanging posture when they're in the trees. Chimpanzees are really forest animals. They're at their highest population density in the forest. Their foods tend to be forest foods, and when we find them in other habitats, they're eating foods very similar to the foods that they eat when they're in the forest. But if they were confined to a habitat that's almost entirely savanna or open country like this, maybe they would begin to behave in a way that was similar to that of the Australopiths. So at Gombe and Mahale, where I did my dissertation research, my early research, there weren't very many places that were open and dry like this. It was mostly forest. So um, I thought that I should try to find a place that's much drier and more open than what we find at Gombe and Mahale. So in 1996, after searching a couple of places that didn't work out, I found a place very close to my postdoctoral research in Western Uganda, and I established the Chimpanzee Project in order to study chimpanzees in this. So this is what and most of the reserve is the floor of the Great Rift Valley. It looks like there's a lot of forest on the slopes there, but part of that is the angle of the slopes that makes it look more forested. Is also grassland and it's very and open. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here because before I did that, after doing that work on locomotion and posture at Gombe and Mahale and trying to apply it to fossils, I spent a couple of years as a postdoc and then another year after I came Indiana University, studying feeding behavior in monkeys in an attempt. This was Richard Wrangham's project, and he hired me as a postdoc to gather these data. So I followed the monkeys around. There are a couple of my field assistants in the bottom right there, now old men as I am, but many years ago. So each day I would go out and check on these guys and follow around a redtail monkey, you see on the top there, or a mangabey, or red colobus group, blue monkeys, and we recorded what they were eating and got samples of it. And the idea was to compare that to chimpanzees to really nail down about the chimpanzee diet. They're not very related to my locomotion and posture data, but it was the sort of a favorite topic of Richard Wrangham, whom I was working with during my dissertation and later. So I thought of this as sort of a distraction from my main interest, but it turns out to have been a very valuable experience for me because following these monkeys around day after day, I got a good sense of how they looked at the world and how chimpanzees were different. Well, what Richard and Nancy Lou Conklin and I found in the studies we published is just really verification of what we had suspected before, and that is that even though chimpanzees eat a wide variety of things, from leaves to odd seeds with little wings on them to termites and pods and fruits, they all have a lot in common. And that is they're low in fiber, they don't have much cellulose in them, and they're low in poisons. Just like humans. I mean, we eat a lot of different things, but if you look at the nutritional quality of these things, they all have some things in common. Monkeys are less finicky. And we say in a sort of jargony way, but not pretty easily interpretable, um, the monkeys eat things that are packed with anti-feedants, and they can cope with those anti-feedants. They can deal with poisons and extracellulose. But we humans and chimpanzees, we have the same dietary requirements. We can't really cope with anti-feedants. So that means that the chimpanzee diet is restricted compared to chimpanzees. Plants are trying to protect their bodies, their energy generating organs, leaves, and their offspring, which are the seeds and fruits, from predators. And they do this by injecting these anti-feedants into their bodies and into fruit when the fruit's not ready to be eaten. So monkeys, if you want to think of it this way, over the last 15 million, 10 million years have become fruit predators or seed predators. They're trying to stymie, they're trying to get around the defenses of these plants and eat these fruits, even when by eating the fruit, they might kill the seed. The plant, of course, doesn't like this, if we could say plants like anything. So monkeys, because they're tolerant of anti-feedants, can eat ripe and unripe fruit. And if we think about a geographic area and it's distributed with all these foods, they're moving through this area and they're eating both, in this case, the ripe and the unripe bananas. But chimps can't eat those unripe things. So they have fewer food items, and their food sources are dispersed, and there aren't as many of them compared to monkeys. Well, this anti-feeding intolerance, if we want to think of it that way for chimpanzees, um, has an effect on their population size because they have less food. So there are fewer of them, and they have to get this food that's dispersed in great distances from one another, which is why they come to the ground instead of staying up in the trees. They come to the ground, walk to the next tree, and then climb up. So they have this low population density. And when you begin to look at other aspects of their, not just their physiology, but their anatomy and their even their social behavior, those things all can be related back to this food distribution and this anti-feed intolerance. So here's a figure from chapter 30 in my book, and as one reviewer said, it looks like a pile of spaghetti. But I spent a chapter sort of breaking this down and talking about these connections. So it turns out that these things are all related to one another. If you look at the fingers of a chimpanzee, you can see how that's related to how they get their food and how the food is distributed. And the same for their brain size and for their reproductive rate and their daily activities, how far they walk in the course of the day. So those things are all so interconnected that I think it helps us to understand not just chimpanzees but other animals if we think about how these different aspects of their biology are connected to one another. And this is helpful for the fossils because we often just have fragments of the fossils and we certainly don't have their social behavior and we don't know directly what their diet is. But since so many things are connected to one another, we can use this sort of web of interconnectedness of different features, anatomy and physiology and social behavior and so on, to reconstruct the fossils. And that's what I'm interested in. So we might expect if you shift chimpanzees from the forest to the dry habitat, you're going to get a shift in a lot of things. And, like dominoes, one thing is going to be connected to another. So Kim and I are trying to look. Might seem at first that we're looking at a lot of different things that are unrelated to one another, but I want to make the argument that these things are all connected to one another, and helping to understand the whole fabric of that adaptation that chimpanzees have is going to help us to understand fossils and how animals adapt to new environments. Bipedalism is one of the things that we think is much more common in chimpanzees in Semliki than it is elsewhere, and it has impacts on the skeleton, not genetically, but just as an animal grows and develops. If they use their bodies differently, their bodies will grow differently. And it turns out that one of the interesting things about chimpanzee bodies is that when they stand up on their hind legs, it changes the way their femur, their thigh bone, develops. We are born very bow-legged. Let me go back to a slide and show that chimpanzee. We're born looking like that. I often show a picture of a baby. I should have thrown that in there. But it's the stresses that act on our knees that cause our knees to become closer together if we stand with our ankles touching one another. So you might be able to see that Semliki chimpanzee is knock-kneed compared to that forest chimpanzee. Well, here's a couple of thigh bones from Semliki, and this is an average chimpanzee from a large tens of chimps from a forest. this is a human. And you can see that if you look at the joint, there's an angle at the knee joint, the surface of that knee joint, there's an angle here in humans, and you have the same angle in chimpanzees. Humans have a larger hip joint, and it looks like the Semliki chimpanzees might be a little, these are both Semliki chimps, might be a little larger than this forest chimp. And then the knee sort of gradually sort of molds in to the shaft of the bone, and you get that as well. So it looks like just standing up on their hind legs a lot has caused their legs to develop a little differently than chimpanzees in the forest. But not just their legs, their hips as well. So their pelvis as well. So this is looking down on the top of a pelvis, and that's a human. And humans have a sort of bowl-shaped pelvis, so that there's a big distance between the articulation for the spine and the attachment for muscles of the thigh that come off up here. So, but just you'll notice that it's bowl-shaped here compared to most animals. This is the Lucy, literally, not just the Lucy fossil, but literally Lucy. And you can see that it's that difference, that length from back, from your spine to the front of your thorax is lesser. And that's more like a chimpanzee. And there's a forest chimpanzee, a sort of classic illustration of that. And there are two Semliki pelvises, and you can see that they're a little bit more like Lucy and a little bit more like humans than the forest chimpanzee. If you look at it from the front, you can see that the chimpanzee pelvis is very tall, and both Lucy and humans have a much shorter pelvis. And the same thing is true for the Semliki pelvis. And the interesting thing is that the part of the pelvis that helps to drive the legs when they're climbing up trees seems to be exactly the same as a forest chimpanzee. But when you look at the upper part of the pelvis that is connected to the muscles of the thigh that help you to walk bipedally, than chimps, a little more human-like. Again, I think this is developmental, not genetics. This is another fossil, Ardipithecus, that the discoverers have interpreted as bipedal, and it looks just like chimpanzees to me. So it's bipedal in the same sense that chimps are bipedal, which is, bipedal occasionally, but not all the time. So to test this, I've begun to use a new method called photogrammetry, where you take hundreds of photos of a bone, and then you meld those together and get a three-dimensional view of it. So there's a chimpanzee that died a few years ago. I was just cleaning her last year, and then I take hundreds of pictures in this little light box here. This is my camp that anybody who goes to the field school will be sitting there sometime, and where our students were the last time we had a field school. So I've imaged these pelvises in an attempt to distinguish how they're different from forest chimps, and I'll be able to get what's called a heat map, where every bit that's different is sort of in red or yellow for the most dramatic differences, and blue when there are no differences. So that's the analysis I'm going to be doing on the pelvis. This isn't directly related to Semliki, but one of the things I've noticed over the years is that the humeri, the upper arm bone of I've actually got a video here if it'll play, but maybe it won't. So this is a photogrammetry image of a captive chimpanzee, and you might notice that it has a lot of planar surfaces. It looks like a sort of a elongated cucumber that's had slices taken out of it, and that's not what you have in wild chimpanzees. And so I'm interested in trying to document that difference. So I'm going to use that same photogrammetry method to try to document the differences between captive and wild chimpanzees. If you look at the face of Lucy as reconstructed on the left here, it looks a lot like chimpanzees, but foods in dry habitats tend to be a little tougher than the succulent foods that you get in the forest, and that's reflected in the face of australopiths. So you can look at the cheekbone where that red arrow is and see the whole face probably looks heavier to you in this Australopith than it does in a chimpanzee. But one of the measurements that I take is one of the easiest ones to see is the height of that cheekbone. And there is a Semliki chimpanzee, which has a taller cheekbone, taller zygomatic, for those of you who know bone jargon, than what you find in forest chimpanzees. Another thing that I've started to do with one of Kim's colleagues when she was in graduate school, Chris Carlson, a former student of mine, is last summer I took CT scans of a bunch of bones from Semliki. We always, when a chimp dies, we always collect the body, and we're hoping to get an idea of what the internal architecture of these bones look like, and we expect them to vary in the direction of humans. Mostly in the femur, which is on the bottom left there, but the humerus might differ as well because Semliki chimpanzees spend a little more time walking, not just bipedally but quadrupedally, because their food sources are spread out so much. I'm hoping that's me on the left there, and some of you may know Tom Scherneman, my colleague here at IU on the right. I'm interested in trying to apply what I know about the ecology and habitat at Semliki to the study of fossils. So my colleagues here at IU have taken coring samples from the Olduvai Gorge, and we can reconstruct habitat to some extent. And I'm hoping to use some of the data I've collected on habitat at Semliki to compare the habitat more directly than just looking at associated fossils using chemical and pollen analyses to sort of see what that habitat was like. This was at University of Minnesota, where there's a coring project. One of the odd things about Semliki is some males, this is a male, chimpanzees have feminized genitalia, and in fact, they're not very robust at all, and we don't know what's going on with that. It may be that there's some sort of toxin in the environment that is an endocrine or hormone disruptor, and that has had an effect on males. But the males at Semliki seem to be less aggressive than males at other places. And part of that is that they're just so spread out, they can't really gather in these large groups and attack one another the way they can other places. And it may be that selection for decreased testosterone associated with violence may have affected them in some way. We don't know. We're still looking at that. There's a more typical male. You should see a big difference there, and not all of his anatomy. But another thing that I'm interested in is the difference between bonobos and chimpanzees. Chimpanzee males are very violent and aggressive and dominant, and among bonobos, females can dominate males, and it's quite different than chimpanzee society. And I think it's because bonobo females can, because of their food distribution, gather in larger groups. And when females can get together and form bonds, they can fight as a group against the males if the males have no reason to form large groups to fight with one another. And the food distribution, I won't go into it now, but doesn't really promote that among bonobos in bonobo habitats compared to chimps. And the last thing, I hope I haven't taken up too much time, but the last thing I want to mention is a little farther away from what I do at Semliki, but this is a very interesting thing to me. Among living apes, even when males are more than twice the body weight of females, female brains are almost the same size. And that's something that we expected to find in fossils, and it's one of the ways that we've used to distinguish whether there are different species. If they have different brain sizes, we've assumed that they must be different species because probably the smaller brain size is not an individual from another species because brain sizes don't differ very much between gorillas. So some of those are crests, but I've circled the part that actually has the brain in it. Well, there's one exception to this, and that is the Hamadryas baboon, where females have brains that are considerably smaller than males. They're only 77% of the capacity. In olive baboons, where females are the core of the social group, females, even though males are twice the body size, have almost the same. This is a very, very, very small sample size, and I'm working on this right now. I'm collecting these brains to of animals that died of natural causes to do this. Well, this is very interesting because female Australopiths, and this is an average of all the cranial capacities we've got, not just these two individuals. Females have, in Australopiths, are not like gorillas. And for chimpanzees, the brains of males and females are almost exactly the same size. Among Australopithecines, females have brains about two-thirds the size of males. Well, I think this is interesting because there's a group of fossils that everybody but me and a couple other folks that are collaborating with me on this project think that this one species, Australopithecus africanus, was quite different from Homo habilis, and you see a reconstruction of them on the above the fossils there. I think they're the same thing. So if we don't worry so much about the cranial capacity difference, or if we think, okay, the cranial capacity difference in Homo habilis and Australopithecus africanus is about the same as Afarensis, then you can fit them into the same species. So here is a male Australopith. There as Lucy. This is a Homo habilis specimen that is supposedly in our lineage, and this is a fossil that many people think is a side lineage, but I think Homo habilis is not a valid taxon. It should be sunk in Australopithecus africanus. And Homo habilis is a very problematical taxon, and I think we can resolve all those problems if we accept there's a lot of sexual dimorphism in them in body size and brain size. Um, I think how much time have I used, Kenny? Have you kept track? Should I mention this? Let me stop right there and
You
let.
are, you've presented for 30 minutes so far.
Okay, let's stop there and let Kim go.
Now, do you have any photos of me in your presentation?
I should, because I've known you a very long time, haven't I? Yes, so I've known both Kenny and Kevin longer. But Kevin, so I came about the chimpanzee project in 2022 when Kevin reached out. But I'd heard about it from years because I was a graduate student of Kevin's at Indiana University. So it is exciting to be involved in this project because I said I heard about it over the years. And Kenny, I've known you since you were a student in Danta. And that's been how long? 18 years, something?
Yes. Yep, I
Yeah,
think so too.
yeah, about that. So Kevin brought me on board to do something that I've been specializing in over the years, which is field courses or experiential learning experiences abroad. So I've been director of DANTA, Association for Conservation of the Tropics, since 2007, and have designed and been running field schools there. So Kevin his research, I mean, this project needs funding. It needs investment in it. So we wanted to put together a field school, one to involve more people in the project, but also to help finance a project. So proceeds from the field school that we designed and we first ran in 2023 are going directly to the Chimpanzee Project. But before that, and one of the reasons that I think maybe also, I have to ask Kevin that directly, but I'd also been involved in Uganda prior to 2022. I first went in 2006, where I was working with the Tropical Biology Association, which is out of Cambridge. And I did a tropical biology course, which we traveled Uganda, and it was an international field course, which was EU subsidized. So 12 students from African nations went and participated in the course, and then we had 12 from European nations. And so then I did that, and then I later got involved in actually 2020 unexpectedly when a community from Bahuma, which is just outside of Burundi in impenetrable forest, contacted me for help because Rafiki was poached. And Rafiki is a pretty famous gorilla. The community reached out to me it's a community relying heavily on ecotourism they have the most gorilla trekking around the park. It's the most popular site. And they were having trouble. They were concerned about the poaching of Rafiki. And then they were reaching out to me for help. And what we did was actually create a project that looks a lot like this. So we decided, well, you can't bring tourists to Uganda during a pandemic. So we are going to develop, and some of their arts they'd already had and were selling to tourists as they visited. We were going to sell this internationally. So we designed websites and promotion materials. And we shipped Ugandan art everywhere, actually, to help fund this community during the pandemic. I've honestly, I interact with them almost daily still in some way, but I've never met them in person. So I hope to this field school. So we'll be offering a Semliki Field School in 2024, 2025. Sorry, that's where we are already. And for them to meet members of the community who I continue to work with. And then in 2022, so kind of put you in my timeline of involvement in Uganda. And now we're at Semliki. Kevin asked me in 2022 to come and to get to know the field site, to get to know his staff, but also to facilitate a group from Spain that was visiting or holding a field course at the field site. So this is us here. This is a group of Spaniards that they were just over a week, I believe, wasn't it, Kevin? Something like that, about a week. And so I facilitated their stay there, and they will be returning this summer in 2025. But that it is becoming, we are trying to recruit more groups and researchers to the field site. This is a picture that I took that first season. This is Kevin with his staff, and Kevin didn't mention, but they track the chimps every day, pretty much. So they're out from dawn to dusk, but you have to maintain camp, and so this is his staff that continue to facilitate field courses, but they're running the day-to-day running of the camp. This is our inaugural field school. So this is Kevin giving a lecture on, he's got bones out. So I think he's talking about the chimp anatomy here in this photo. And we brought students from across the United States in 2023 for our first field school. It's a field school again, so we're trying to encourage more involvement in the field site, but also to help to supplement because Kevin pays for, I mean, the staff. And I will say, so I'm coming from more of a conservation of the chimps, but also of the research station perspective. And I think we can say with 30 years of being there, I think the chimps in Semliki are alive because of Kevin's research. And Kevin may think that's an extreme statement, but I mean, the presence of the trackers out every day, the camp being nearby, it is a fragile environment from a conservation perspective. We do have poachers. And the research itself, it is in the presence of people have kept these chimps alive. So we're wanting to increase involvement in the camp for those reasons. This is Kevin in the field, showing them, and Kevin can tell me what they're eating here.
That is Saba Florida,
Uh-huh.
and it's a very interesting fruit because it has the exocarp or like the skin on an orange. It is woody and it's very difficult to get into. So it's a favorite food of chimps, but monkeys can hardly get into it. It's maybe their most important food.
Right. So, yeah, this is one of the field shots. So we were taking students into the forest every day and tracking the chimps, but also learning signs of spotting chimps, the fruits they were eating, seeing other wildlife as well. This is this is the camp. So in the lower corner is kind of from the distance from the entrance of the camp. We stay in tents. There are platforms for the staff, and the tents underneath the platforms. We have a cantina, which also serves the dual purpose of being a lecture hall. And then here are some of the other primate species. So I hope this summer, 2025, to have the students kind of work on a mini black and white colobus project, one of Kevin's grad students, Rick Warch, had started working with play behavior in Kibale, and he's kind of reached out if we kind of look at it in a dry habitat. So Kevin, I thought that would be kind of a neat little way for them to learn to measure animal behavior or primate behavior.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, is to help Rick with this project.
Hmm.
Some of the other wildlife that you can see. Well, this actually, we've moved here. So our field course runs, we fly into Entebbe. Our first season, 2023, we went to Entebbe Zoo, which was a great experience. This season, we're going to be going to Ngamba, which is a sanctuary for chimpanzees. Um, and we're going to be spending, part of the day there, learning about their work. A lot of those animals have been caught and Kevin can correct me on this, but I believe they've been caught in the pet trade, and then have been relocated to Ngamba, but they cannot be reintroduced into the wild. So they've made a wonderful habitat environment for them there. So we do that, and then we make our way down to Semliki, where we spend about a week at Semliki tracking chimps, looking at the other wildlife, and also studying other primates. From there, we go to Queen Elizabeth National Park. And so these are some pictures that I actually took from Queen Elizabeth, which was really a highlight of the trip. We saw a lion really close. It was actually really right next to our vehicle, the elephants, water buffalo, and then a crocodile. After that, we make our way to for a gorilla trek. And so this is showing actually some of our students on a gorilla trek. Um, and it was just amazing. I think that was Kevin's first time as well. It's also exhausting. But it was worth it when we saw the first gorilla pop its little head up. And I think we first saw the baby or the young one that popped its head up out of the tall grass. And it was actually a magical experience and highlight of the trip. And then from there, we make our way back to Entebbe. We spend a night in a guest house before flying out. During the field course, I mean, we're incorporating this season. I'll be having a member of the Uganda Wildlife Authority will be working with us, and he's actually a ranger, so he'll be traveling with us as part of the course, and he'll be lecturing. Also, a returning Danta student will be coming back to do some work, and he will also give a talk on his experience in Madagascar. We're going to incorporate a lot. I think it's really important for us to incorporate the local community in the course and to have them participate as much as possible. Now, this is a new project, and Mary Zarilla, I believe, is on here. And she is a graduate student at Marshall University in the biological sciences. And she's just come aboard in the last month and a half, and we've been working on a project for her. And that's going to be surveying the biodiversity of Tooro-Semliki Wildlife Reserve. So she's going to be using audio recorders and camera traps to monitor the wildlife. She's particularly interested in cats, so that's why I put the picture of all the cats. And this will be in collaboration. And I've reached out to a cat conservation organization who is interested particularly in the golden cat, which is pictured at the top. And they're particularly interested in it. So we're going to be doing a kind of a wide survey of it along the riparian part where we find the chimps, but also more into the savanna. In addition to picking up cats, we'll also be able to get an idea of, we'll hear the chimps. If they're making a sound, we'll pick them up. We're going to have them scattered all over the forest into the savanna. Other primates, birds, insects. So we'll be able to monitor those as well and or get some idea of the numbers of those. And I put this up, Kevin showed you this because the proceeds, and he didn't mention this because he's modest, The proceeds of the book go to fund the Chimpanzee Project. So all the proceeds from the sale of the book go back to maintaining the camp, its research unit, but also they do have anti-poaching patrols that that go out regularly to remove snares that are in the forest. And I believe I ended on that slide, and mine was rather short compared to Kevin's talk, but that is it for me.
That chimpanzee on the cover of the book is the same chimp I showed that has the feminized genitalia. His name is Jacko. Um,
Thank you both for an excellent presentation, and your presentation, your webinar, was part of the TIES, Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science, monthly webinars. We offer free educational opportunities for teachers and their students during the school year, September through May. My name is Kenny Coogan. I am the Center for Inquiry Education Coordinator, and we have three programs which I'm going to talk to about very briefly. The first one is TIES, Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science. We have a very active Facebook page. Every day we post something about evolution in the news, different findings, and all of our past webinars for the past 2 or 3 years are posted on our very active YouTube channel. And I just thought of this during your presentation that we just celebrated our 10 years a week ago, because we did it 10 years ago for Darwin Day. And since then, we have presented at least 332 in-person workshops in all 50 states. Wow. So we have been to every science state conference. And then in addition to that, because of my background, we have presented at many science museums and zoos and aquariums and different cultural institutions all over the country. We have about 70 teachers in our teacher corps who present on our behalf once they're trained. And the best thing about all three programs is everything is free, because we want teachers to be empowered to teach evolution. So we have different resources, including full curriculum, full lessons. So you can, if you need to cover 3 weeks of evolution, we have all your slides, all your labs, all your activities, all your worksheets, and of course, all the answer keys. If you go to our website, you'll see different videos and then all those activities. And most of them, if not all of them, have free lesson plans, because we do know that some of your principals and school boards require you to submit lesson plans. So we have done all of that for you. Like I mentioned, all of our resources are free except for one, and that is our book. It's called On Teaching Evolution. The foreword is written by Richard Dawkins. And the only reason why this is not free is because we have to pay the publisher to print it. But if you would like to purchase it, we would be very grateful. We're having a buy one, get one sale all the time. So you can buy one and gift one to your district's library, or you can gift it to another science teacher. But if you don't want to buy it, all of the lessons and labs by chapter are on our website for free as well. The other program, one of the other programs that we have, the sister program, is called Science Saves. This is a nonpartisan effort to promote science appreciation by highlighting the many ways science has unleashed human potential, transformed our lives, and given us the tools to overcome all manner of challenges. TIES is all about science and being science standard aligned, whereas Science Saves, we do have, of course, science lessons, but we also have language arts, math, history lessons. Once again, everything is free, and both programs are K through 12. We also are working on having a National Science Appreciation Day, and our proposed date is March 26th to celebrate Jonas Salk revealing the successful development of his polio vaccine. And as of today, we have at least 22, but I'm going to say 25 state governors have signed into law National Science Appreciation Day. If you go to sciencesaves.org, you can click on Who's Celebrating, and you can see if your state is participating And if they are not, we have a petition for you to sign and share. The last program I'm going to talk about is Generation Skeptics. Generation Skeptics is a program that aims to develop and foster an understanding of the world through inquiry-based learning. And once again, we have K through 12 resources because we want to instill skills in young people, like not taking anything at face value and to question their own beliefs. And we also have summer camp curriculum, after school curriculum, in addition to using like bell ringers or like pre-work. You can, sprinkle it in throughout your year. And Kim, found this picture of us from 18 years ago.
Oh, I see. I see.
This was back when you had red, when the flash got your eye before the cameras were
Yeah, when I was a
good.
cat, I'd have cat eyes.
But then, Kim, look who you're next to.
Uh-huh.
And I
Kim
have to
Buckley.
mention that Kim will be doing his own ties webinar in 2 months from now, because he has been doing a lot of work in Madagascar. And that's just one of the many awesome webinars that are coming up. And I will mention, usually if somebody is publishing a book, if they're an author, we work with the publisher and we give away the book. So if anyone's interested in watching this as a recording, if you can attend our March 18th webinar, we are going to be giving away 5 copies of this brand new book. Okay. Kevin, Josh asks, why did the captive chimp have a different shaped leg bone than the wild?
It's the arm bone. I don't think the legs are as different. Nobody knows. I'll be the first person to have documented this, but I have a theory. And having studied chimps in zoos, they're inactive most of the time. They just sit. I mean, nowadays we're getting better and better habitats for them, but most captive animals aren't very active. And you all of us probably already know from having heard health warnings and research that your bones are much denser the more active you are. Well, chimps in the wild are active 13 hours a day. They get up in the morning and they go, 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 go. And I think what happens in zoos is their bones are not quite as dense, and they spend most of their time sitting around. But every once in a while, it's feeding time, or something happens to get them worked up, and then all hell breaks loose, and they're running around and banging on things and leaping from place to place. And I think that the what are called Sharpie's fibers, the fibers that go into your bone that hold your tendons in place, pull on the bone and create these micro fractures that then heal, and that causes the bone to be uneven like that. That's my theory, but we'll have to see. So one of my other students will look at bone density and see if that is different, and I expect it to be.
You described Semliki as a grassland.
Yeah. It's a savanna habitat, and most people think of savannas when they think of the Great Plains, where there's you see a tree maybe a mile away. Savanna actually can have up to 30% tree cover, but that means as you look down from an airplane or something, 70% of what you see is grass. And what Semliki is a mosaic of grassland with some watercourses that pass through it, and trees grow around those watercourses. So chimps much, much, much prefer to be in those trees, and it looks just like the forest, and it's not quite as dense, but there's less rain, but many of the same species that you find in forests.
So Jane asks, is there another environment in the world where chimps exhibit similar characteristics, body morphology as the Semliki population, or do chimps typically live in a more forested area?
They're almost all in forested or seasonal forests. The Gombe and Mahale are both seasonal forests. Rainforests, you get rain almost every day, and they have a rainy season and a dry season. But chimps are densest in forest, then next in the seasonal forest. It's very unusual for them to be in these dry habitats. There are 2 other places where there's research going on, one in Tanzania called Issa, and another in Senegal, Fangoli, and nobody has yet looked at these bones closely. I've been invited to go and look at the bones at Fongoli, but I just haven't had a chance to look at it yet. But they are a little more bipedal at Fongoli, but we're not sure exactly about the other place.
Ryan asks, can you speak to the nature background of the native Uganda chimp trackers? Are they interested in conservation? Do they love nature, or do they just see it as a job? I heard that some gorilla trackers in Uganda, Rwanda used to be poachers, but now see the importance of preserving them, their habitat, and can sustain their families more easily as trackers and not as poachers.
Yeah, I think Kim can talk about this too, but having worked at Kibale beginning in '89, so many years ago, I've hired maybe 100 people to work at various times. And my experience is that more often they're just interested in the money than conservation. But there's a selection process as the years go by. The folks that really are interested in the animals get promoted and they're willing to stay on and suffer I mean, it's hard work. And the others tend to drop out for one reason or another. So I think that at my site, for instance, I think all of them are a little interested, more than a little. They're interested in conservation, but a couple folks are really dedicated to it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the more, and I don't know if anybody really likes poaching. Like I said, I was contacted when Rafiki was poached. The community was alarmed by the poaching, but you have to eat, and that's a reality. If there's no tourism, we're up against hard realities, and you have no other way to feed yourself. People are going to go into the forest and they're going to hunt. So I think as they become more economically stable and see the rewards, the values change with that. Because certainly showing people animals and wildlife and nature is much more pleasant than going out and stalking something or hunting something. My experience, and I think Kevin has some wonderful staff that are very dedicated. Kenneth being probably the one
Kenneth,
that
yeah.
most comes to mind, and also Seth. He's a ranger, but I
Yeah.
think he's really concerned about it. And I think over time with economics, if they can depend on the income and that the values change.
I think you can think if you think of the U.S., you'll get a better sense of what it's like. So you imagine next to Yellowstone. There are folks who want to go and kill buffalo in Yellowstone, but then the other folks that know them, some of them may not feel like they want to call the cops on them, but they're critical of it. They don't approve of it. So I mean, there are people who are willing to break the law and they don't really care about conservation, and then many people in the community recognize the value of these conservation areas, and they don't approve of it, but sometimes they're reluctant to do much about it. We have to rely on law enforcement for that.
Yeah, that's cultural. And I know when I did the Tropical Biology Association course, one thing that came out that surprised me, and the students involved in that course were already professionals in Africa. They were in management, wildlife management positions, is that it is poaching for some of these. I'm not necessarily a chimpanzee. I think the chimps get into them or gorillas just when they're trying to poach for something else, maybe a diker, maybe. Um, but it was cultural. And they said that some of these animals were preferred food sources during the holidays. So you could actually go to high-end restaurants and find diker and warthog and water buffalo and things on the menu. And so that is a cultural thing. That's not a need. So I don't think we can lump it all into one um, big category. Everybody's doing it for the same reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well, I
yeah,
know that a lot of poachers, and I've talked to folks over the years who are disdainful of who are very disapproving of poachers. And one of my assistants years ago said, I was talking with him about poaching, and he said they're ne'er-do-wells and drunks. They're people that can't hold down a regular job, and they borrow money from everyone they can, and then when they're desperate and nobody will loan them any more money, they're willing to break the law to go and gather some wild animals to sell in the market, to pay off some of their debts, and then some of them go straight, as it were, and others, they just keep resorting to that again and again until they're arrested so often that they have to give it up. So there are folks that need the food. Those are just a few. There are folks that do it for these economic reasons, and there are folks who don't approve of conservation areas. I've had folks to say, I was with a guy that was helping me at Mahale once, and he stopped at this place and he said, "This is where my grandfather's farm was," and then the government came and took it all away from us. There's a diversity in opinions and views.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of human wildlife conflict, which we'll address in our field course with Seth, and I think we should bring it up. But yeah, I was at Kibale at the same when in 2006, and that was, remember that the human infant was killed by a chimp.
Yeah.
And that was on the discussion in that field course.
Yeah.
What do you do? I mean, here is a human that is killed by a chimp, but the chimp's protected, and the community felt, and perhaps rightfully so, that the government was on the side of the chimp,
Yeah.
not the infant. And
You,
these
you
are
can go
big
to
issues.
you can go to YouTube and hear speeches from members of parliament in Uganda, saying, why does the government value these brutal, violent animals over humans? So we value them because we know how important they are for science, but there are human conflicts. So so Kim, you talked about that infant dying, but um, one of my colleagues who keeps track of this said that five infants a year are killed in Uganda
That was my phone.
by chimpanzees. So it's a common thing, and that makes them less interested in conservation.
I went to Iceland many years ago and they told me the only reason why they still hunt those 300-year-old Greenland sharks and whales is because tourists want to eat them. They said
Yeah.
like real Icelandic people haven't wanted to eat them for hundreds of years, or
Mm.
they used to do it because of necessity, but now they have reduced their numbers of poaching or hunting, but they still do it because the tourists want it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't see tourists. I didn't see anything on Uganda menu, maybe, that the tourists would want, but it's certainly their
Well,
local
maybe a
delicacies.
warthog for Christmas.
Yeah, somebody would want a warthog for Christmas.
Um, Pam, can you talk about the type of students you're looking for your field work? Because when I signed up with you many, many years ago, in the description, it like specifically said like no field work experience needed because my bachelor's degree was animal behavior, and I wanted to study animals, and it's hard to get a job when you don't have fieldwork experience. So can you talk a bit about the ideal candidate?
Um, I'm
Should they
looking
be
for,
majoring in biology and animal behavior, or tourism, or
yeah, we have right now, who's the ones we have enrolled, and the first season, they were largely anthropologist or biologist. They were looking to gain experience. I don't think any of them came with field experience. This season, so far, we have some mature students that have been working in zoos a long time, and they've been working with chimps and other primates, and they want to learn about them in the wild. And I think that's great. So they're out of university. I think if they demonstrate passion for it, and enthusiasm for the animals, then yeah, they're a great candidate. But no, they don't necessarily have to have. I mean, we're not hardcore in making them. We do some long hikes. The gorilla trek is definitely a trek. But we did it and it's an achievement when you complete it. But no, no specific. I mean, it's going to be typically people with a biology or really interested in natural history. And I know with the Spaniards, their course, not all of them were biology. Some of them were up in their 60s, 70s, um, that were coming because they've always wanted to trek chimps. right? I mean, that was their motivation. And she was amazing. There was a woman who was, I think she was in her mid 70s, and she was doing yoga every morning and up tracking chips all day long. And she was probably the hardiest of us all. I mean, she was just really passionate. So I think it's passion and drive for it.
And are you talking about your summer course in Uganda or all of your courses?
All of the courses. I mean, the Danta courses now have it's typically undergraduate students looking to gain credit. So I'm taking quite a few this year from Marshall University. We'll be taking one from Marshall to Uganda, which is great. Actually, two with Mary, the grad student, and one undergrad. Um, but most of them are undergrads looking for credit and experience. Some of them want to come back to learn the methods to start research. So I've had a number, and one now she's going to be doing a research project. So I'm helping her set up her research during the course, and then she will stay on a little longer in the OSA to finish her project.
Yeah, Kev's great about teaching these techniques. She's a real expert on it, and students come away with a lot of skills that they didn't have when they arrived.
So the group is majority undergraduate, but it could also be an adult learner, a
For
lifelong
Dan
learner.
for Danta, the majority are undergraduate. Lifelong learners could come, but it tends to be a younger crowd, and so sometimes they're okay with it, sometimes they're not. But the Uganda trip, I've got a mix right now. I've got professionals that are working in the field. I have a woman who started out in biology, wildlife sciences, who went on to do something completely different, and she wants to come back and she wants to do this experience, and why not, right? I mean, she was trained in it, but after years, it's been like a decade, she wants to revisit it and she wants to come on this trip.
All right. And then, Kim, where can they go to learn more? And after you say this, it will be in the notes of the YouTube link.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, they can go to it's called it's the Semliki Primate Behavior and Conservation Field School. And so we have a blog. So if you just Google that, you will find it, right? And they'll give them all the information, and my contact information.
All right, perfect. And for those of you interested in learning more about chimps, you can go to Kevin's webinar from 2 years ago for ties, which has been viewed many, many, many times.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
thank
review
you
my
both
book
for
there.
an excellent presentation. And thank you everyone else who attended this live. And we look forward to you attending future ties webinars.
Yes.
Thank you, Kevin and Kim.
Thank you, Ken.
Everyone else,
Yeah,
have a
thank
good
you,
night.
Kenny.
Yeah.